Hi there everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel and I'm a real estate agent and advisor here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with RE/MAX 360 Realty. So today I'm going to be talking about the 10 best suburbs to move to in Pittsburgh if you are moving to the South Hills of Pittsburgh. Now, these rankings are going to be based on this website called Niche. You've probably heard of it and you've probably used it to do real estate research. It is a fantastic tool to really get a read on any one community, and sometimes there are things that you can't really ask a real estate agent due to fair housing laws, so it's always best to do Google research on certain statistics. So I'm going to be starting with a community called McMurray. So that's going to be in the southwest area of the South Hills of Pittsburgh. It's going to be a community that's going to be, I'd say, about 25 to 30 minutes south of downtown Pittsburgh. It's an area where, yes, you're going to have to go through quite a bit of traffic to get to and fro if you're traveling from the city to McMurray. But it's got a lot of features in that it has basically everything you would need there. Like, you wouldn't need to leave McMurray for the essentials. It has a giant strip of commerce on 19 South. It's got the grocery stores, it's got the car dealerships, it's got the furniture stores, it's got the every kind of store you can imagine, just for miles and miles of road. The houses there are gonna be a little bit more expensive, and the taxes, the property taxes that is, are going to be a little bit higher. But typically you're gonna find a home there that is bigger, a home that has more square footage. A lot of the homes tend to have nicer features, nicer appliances inside, nicer finishes, because the people living in this community tend to have a little bit more money than some of the other surrounding communities. So yes, I would say it's a bit of a wealthy community overall. Some of the parts of McMurray and, you know, what you would call Peters Township are in Washington County, and the property taxes in Washington County are a lot lower than in Allegheny County. So that is definitely a huge draw for a lot of people to move to this area. Plus, the school district in McMurray, which would be Peters Township, is a fantastic school district that has seen a lot of praise over the years. In addition to all that, you are surrounded by a lot of nature, a lot of trails, and a lot of parks nearby. So again, you're not gonna really need to leave McMurray for any reason. It has it all right there, unless you're going north for some reason. There are some things that make McMurray seem a little bit removed from the rest of Pittsburgh, but overall, it's a great place to live if you can find the budget to live there. So the overall niche grade is an A+. A+ public schools, A+ housing, A+ good for families, no rating on crime and safety, B- for nightlife, and C+ for diversity. Homes in McMurray tend to run anywhere from $275,000 up to, I'd say probably $1 million. So the next community we're gonna be talking about is Upper St. Clair. Upper St. Clair is a short ways up north towards the city. From McMurray, so if you were going just a little bit north, Upper St. Clair is basically right next door. It is another community that has a bit of a wealth factor. I don't like putting it that way, but it's known for its like more expensive, larger houses. It's more expensive tax-wise. It's got good schools. It's got like a really well-built, solid community. So yeah, all of those things put together, you're gonna find a community that is, well, it's very close-knit. It's also very, you know, expensive. Property taxes are gonna be pretty high in Upper St. Clair just because it's in Allegheny County, and I believe all parts of Upper St. Clair are in Allegheny County. That being said, a lot of people love living there. It's very close to the South Hills Village Mall. The schools are award-winning schools, and it's far enough away from the densely packed part of the South Hills that I always talk about that people feel like they're getting a suburban experience, but it's not too crowded, and they get a little bit more land and they get a little bit more quiet. So they're avoiding that high population density that comes with a lot of neighborhoods in the South Hills. So all of those things put together, it is a huge draw to live in Upper St. Clair.
Good neighborhood.
And you still have access to, again, lots of parks and lots of recreational activities so close by. Houses in Upper St. Clair tend to go for, I would say, anywhere from $350,000 to over $1 million. So the niche grades: A+ overall niche grade, A+ public schools, A housing, A+ good for families, A- crime and safety, B for nightlife, and B- for diversity. The next community on my list is going to be none other than Mount Lebanon. I was actually surprised when I looked at the niche list because I thought Mount Lebanon was going to be number 1 without question. It was number 3. Not sure why. It's probably because Mount Lebanon has just had this reputation for being so expensive, but also just like so crowded and so overdone in a way. Don't get me wrong, it's still a popular place to live. It's just, I think people are kind of steering more towards communities that are a little bit farther from all of the action. But when you speak of the action, Mount Lebanon's got it. Mount Lebanon has the bars, the nightlife, it has the restaurants, it has the walkability, it has the T running straight through it. It has the amazing schools, I think like 1 or 2, it's either like 1, 2, or 3 top rated in all of Western Pennsylvania, like a very prestigious school for public school standards. It's got the parks, it's got the tight-knit community, it's got the families, it's got the police force, it's got the safety, it's got all of the things that people are really looking for whenever they want to build a life and start a family and do all of those things. It's also one of those communities where it's like I don't know, people don't really leave Mount Lebanon because they don't need to. Like if they're going to the grocery store, they probably have to drive over to the village, but yeah, they don't really need to like leave. So it's a great place to find a forever home. However, the homes in Mount Lebanon are a little bit old. They can be a little bit drafty. They can be a little bit expensive for what they are just because people so want to live there. In comparison to like, you know, if you were to buy a home in Peters Township or McMurray, you might get more bang for your buck. The houses do need a lot of work and upkeep just because they are a little bit older. The houses are kind of more cramped together than some people would like, but overall it is a great place to start a family, build your life, and do all of that stuff. I grew up close to Mount Lebanon, so I know Mount Lebanon like the back of my hand. My parents actually live there, so I'm very well acquainted with it. Mount Lebanon is like this whole thing. I'm gonna do, I think my first tour in the spring here is gonna be in Mount Lebanon. I'm gonna take a walk around, I'm gonna drive around, but it's like this whole thing. It's like, I would even say it's sort of like the Mecca of the South Hills, you know, with its reputation and everything, but yeah, you'll learn if you keep watching this channel that Mount Lebanon is a whole thing, and if you are interested in the South Hills, Mount Lebanon should definitely be on your radar. I'd say homes in Mount Lebanon go anywhere from $200,000 to over $1 million, although there are very few homes that are $1 million mansions in Mount Lebanon. So, A+ overall niche grade, of course, A+ public schools, A housing, A+ good for families, B on crime and safety, A on nightlife, and B- for diversity. Bethel Park is next. I've had a lot of inquiries from out-of-towners who want to move to Bethel Park. And I think the reason is because it's just got a good mix of affordability in a lot of areas of Mount Lebanon, here we go with Mount Lebanon again. It has a good mix of affordability, and good schools, but also you get that separated feel that you don't get in Mount Lebanon. It's got a lot more roads and it's got a lot more space, but there is a ton of houses in Bethel Park, and Bethel Park High School I think is one of the most populated high schools in the whole area. It might be second place to Mount Lebanon, but just the land mass, like the area of Bethel Park is huge. It's ginormous. So many people live in Bethel Park, but at the same time, it's like most of it is very spread out. It just generally has a good reputation for a lot of things. You know, it's a good place to buy a house for relative affordability. It's close to the South Hills Village Mall. It's close to shopping centers, and the trolley line actually runs through a lot of Bethel Park. So if you need to take public transportation and get into the city, but you don't want to live close to the city, Bethel Park is going to be the perfect place to live. You can just park your car at the park and ride or buy a house close to the T and go straight into the city without much hassle. I mean, honestly, there's not much downside to Bethel Park. I mean, I think sometimes the traffic in Bethel Park can be really brutal just because it's such a densely packed area that like everybody that lives there is always trying to get to and fro, and I've seen terrible lines of traffic in Bethel Park, unlike anywhere else in the city. I mean, it's bad there. The traffic is really something to behold. But overall, it's just got a lot of great things going for it, and although the property taxes can be pretty expensive there, it's easier to find a more affordable house than some of the other areas I mentioned. So I'd say houses in Bethel Park run anywhere from 180 to maybe 600 or so thousand. A, overall niche grade. A, public schools. A, housing. A, good for families. B, on crime and safety. A- on nightlife, and B- on diversity. I just want to make a note that I also grew up very close to Bethel Park. It's another community I know like the back of my hand. So if you want like a little bit more of an immersive deep dive into Bethel Park, definitely send me a DM on Instagram, or you can text me at my phone number or send me an email, whatever is most comfortable for you. The next community I'm going to be talking about is Canonsburg. Canonsburg is the southmost community on this list. I believe all of it is in Washington County. So it's one of those communities that people have flocked to over the last few years because they jacked up the tax rates again in Allegheny County.
Oh my God.
And so people fled to Washington County to avoid the rising tax rates here. The same could be said for McMurray, but McMurray is definitely more expensive. You're getting that Washington County experience in Canonsburg for a lot cheaper than McMurray. One of the great things about Canonsburg is that it has affordable housing. I mean, I've seen houses sell there for as low as like 180, I think. It's a little bit too far out for some people to consider, and I think that's why it's a little bit easier to get a house there than some other places. But it's got a lot going on. I mean, Canonsburg has a ton of commerce, a ton. And it has Sarah's Chocolate Factory, which is, if you move to Pittsburgh, you have to try Sarah's Chocolates immediately. It is delicious. It is the best chocolate on planet Earth. I am convinced.
Chocolate, wow.
But it also has South Point close by, which is another big business type of space. So there's a lot of like big businesses sort of making office spaces there. So there is a lot of people that are actually working from South Point, and then they go home to Canonsburg and they don't have to commute to the city, which is huge because Canonsburg is kind of far away from the city. So if you can avoid that commute, that would be excellent. But I think there's a lot of job opportunity in South Point, and if you want to be removed from Allegheny County and you still want to get like a almost rural type feel, Canonsburg could be a great place to set down roots. So it has an A- overall niche grade. It's got A, public schools, A- housing, A, good for families, B, crime and safety, B+ nightlife, and B- for diversity. So the next community I'm going to be talking about is Scott Township. Scott Township is very close to Mount Lebanon. It's right next door. Parts of Scott Township are practically Mount Lebanon, so they're very closely related, but they do not have the same school. People that live in Scott Township send their kids to Chartiers Valley, which is a school that is not quite as praised as Mount Lebanon, but I'll just leave it there because really, I mean, all the schools in suburban Western Pennsylvania are pretty darn good compared to a lot of places in the country. So still, it's a great area to live, especially if you want to feel like you're living in Mount Lebanon, but you don't really want to pay the Mount Lebanon taxes, property taxes, and the Mount Lebanon prices, and all that good stuff. It's also a little bit more of a spread out community than Mount Lebanon. It's not so densely packed, and it's inching a little bit closer to the airport, which is good if you need to go to the airport a lot. Scott Township has got its own set of shops that make living very convenient. If you live in Scott Township, you're probably gonna need a car because the public transportation there is kind of weak. But otherwise, it's a great place to raise a family. It's another tight-knit community in the South Hills. It has that South Hills feel to it that you sort of can't get in other areas of the city, which is hard to explain, but it's you kind of have to drive around and go to see it, I guess, in order to understand it. But yeah, overall, it's a fine place to live. It's number 5 on the list. It's just very similar to Mount Lebanon. Everything that I already said about Mount Lebanon, I can kind of attribute to Scott Township, except for like the prestige. But yeah, it's a little bit cheaper to live there, and I think a lot of people that are looking for affordability, but they still want to live in a really great community, I think Scott Township will check a lot of those boxes. So houses in Scott Township can run anywhere from, I'd say, $200 to the high 5s. Overall niche grade is going to be A. B+ public schools, A- housing, A good for families, B- crime and safety, A for nightlife, and B+ for diversity. Again, I'm not going to extrapolate on a lot of these ratings. My advice would be to check out niche yourself and find out what these ratings are all about. So the next township on the list really surprised me. I was not expecting it to be this high up, just because it's not a community that's like widely talked about a ton or widely praised for any particular reason. So I'm gonna look at this for a little bit and see why it's so high and give you my opinion on why it might be so high. But it's South Park, which South Park is a little bit more south of Bethel Park, I believe, and it's like Bethel Park's little sister, I guess is the best way to explain it. It's just like two communities that are really sort of close together. I will say that I know that South Park has a giant recreational park. I mean, like, you can hike, you can bike, you can play with your family on the jungle gyms, and you can play football, and they have a bunch of tennis courts, and I'm sure they have soccer fields and all kinds of stuff. It's just this huge park. It actually has its own little theater called South Park Theater that I participated in when I was a kid. But yeah, it's just got a lot going on in that area. So that might be why it's high, but let me check it out. Yeah, so it's saying that there are lots of bars, restaurants, coffee shops, and parks, which is giving it a nightlife rating and an A good for families rating. So that's probably why. And they're also saying the public schools in South Park are above average, which I don't know. I'm sure they're fine, as are basically every school in this area, as are basically all schools in this area. So yeah, my read on South Park is just that it's got a great park. It's close to the South Hills Village Mall. It's close to the Bethel, I think it's the Bethel Shopping Center. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. There's like, on 88, there's a whole set of shops on 88, which is like Route 88 in South Park and Bethel Park. So there's just a ton of there's just a lot of shopping and a lot of like strip malls going on in that area. So it's on that stretch of road. South Park is close to that stretch of road where everything's going on. So that could be why it also has that A nightlife rating. Homes in South Park can range anywhere from 175 to, I'd say, low 500s. It's got B+ public schools, A- housing, A good for families, A- crime and safety, A nightlife, B- diversity, and overall the grade is an A. One more thing I'd like to mention about South Park also is that the T does run through parts of South Park, which make it super convenient actually, but the T ends in South Park, so you're looking at a very long ride from South Park to downtown. So the next community I'm going to be talking about is Castle Shannon, which, who else? I grew up there, so I'm probably a little bit biased about Castle Shannon, but at the same time, I might be pretty realistic about it as well because I know what its downfalls are. I'm not going to go too far into any downfalls in this video because these are really the best communities in the South Hills. If you want more information about Castle Shannon, I can really give you a thorough debriefing on Castle Shannon. Just, again, message me about that. So I will say that the best part about Castle Shannon is there's two things. One, it's the public transportation hub, maybe besides Dormont, but it's the T is everywhere you turn. Like, you really can't buy a house in Castle Shannon without like turning your head and seeing a T station almost. Like, all the T stations run through Castle Shannon. It's just like a big T area. So it's very, very, very convenient if you live downtown.
This is Rachel from the future. If you work downtown, not live
downtown, you will not have to drive downtown if you live in Castle Shannon. You're just not gonna have to do it. There's no reason to. It's very convenient in that way. Also, the housing is so cheap compared to everywhere else in the area. I don't know why that is. I just think people haven't really caught on to Castle Shannon yet, but also I think the inventory in Castle Shannon only comes up once in a blue moon because people don't list there very often. It does seem to me like, you know, having grown up there, that when people buy a house in Castle Shannon, they tend to stay in that house forever. So if you are looking to build your forever family, there are quite a few good options in Castle Shannon that are both large and affordable. There is also a lot of different types of houses. There's colonials, there's ranches, there's just a bunch of different kinds. So it's a very diverse place to buy a house in that way. You're also looking at the Keystone Oaks School District, which I went to. I was educated there, and I would consider myself a pretty intelligent person, so I think KO is A-okay.
It's okay.
So it is, it's a little bit densely populated, but it's got that suburban feel to it. You know, you're not missing out on anything there. The property taxes are a lot lower than a lot of other places. I don't know if they're trying to jack up the rate. They might have been for a couple years, I don't know, but when I was in high school, they were having some issues with that. The school district was really trying to get them to raise the taxes on their residents, which I don't think they wanted to do because they have been there a long time and they don't want that comfort taken away from them. So I think that was definitely part of it. So Castle Shannon does have things going on. There is nightlife, there are bars, but one thing that always annoyed me about Castle Shannon is how little I feel it has always had going on compared to some other communities. Like, it paled in comparison to Dormont because I feel like Dormont just had a lot more walkability and it had a lot more going on. So maybe it's changed a bit since I lived there. I haven't lived there in many years, but it did feel a little bit subdued compared to other places nearby and not as exciting. But if you're looking for like a quiet family life that's not too densely packed, then it might be a good place to live. But really, the two things that draw me to Castle Shannon are the affordability factor and, of course, the public transportation. So its overall niche grade is going to be an A. A- public schools, A- housing, A good for families, B+ crime and safety, A for nightlife, and B for diversity. So it's actually funny because the last three here, which I already went through one of them, Castle Shannon, they are part of the Keystone Oaks School District. So I'm not going to keep harping on and on about Keystone Oaks. It's a good school. It is what it is. It's not Mount Lebanon, but it's a good school. So I wouldn't hesitate to send my kids there. Like, I truly wouldn't. I would totally send my kids to KO. So Green Tree is like, it's very similar to Scott Township. It's very close to Scott Township. It's like kind of somewhere like kind of between Mount Lebanon, Banksville, Westwood, and Scott Township. It's a very, very, very small community, but the houses are pretty nice, and I'd say they're decently affordable. They're probably about as affordable as Scott Township, so not super cheap like Castle Shannon real estate can be, and not super expensive like the high end of Mount Lebanon. But yeah, there's not much to say about Green Tree because it doesn't have a lot going on and it's very small. There is a little shopping area in Green Tree right before you get onto the, I think it's 376 West towards the airport. It's just like very sort of, I don't want to say quiet because it is a little bit dense, but it's like quaint in its own way. And like Green Tree is just Green Tree. I know this isn't sounding very professional, but just having grown up here, it's just like a quiet, small community with really like nice, clean space, and it seems like the people that live there take care of their spaces. So, I mean, it's a great place to live if you want to be a little bit closer to the airport, but you also want to send your kids to like a decently rated school. And if you want like a little bit more affordability than Mount Lebanon, it might be the perfect place to live. So its overall niche grade is going to be A. A- public schools, A- housing, A good for families, B+ crime and safety, A nightlife, and B minus diversity. The price range of Green Tree is going to run anywhere from, I'd say, $250 to high 400s. So the last community I'm going to be talking about is my beloved Dormont. Dormont is probably my favorite place in Pittsburgh. Well, it's one of them. It's definitely like top 3. Dormont is for sure my favorite place in the South Hills. Like, for sure. It's got it all. It's got the walkability. It's got the nightlife. It's got the tea. It's got the houses. My God, the houses in Dormont are gorgeous. They're old. They are old, but a lot of them are big houses. And although they need that upkeep, they have such character and warmth and deliciousness to them. And I am biased because I actually grew up half in Dormont, half in Castle Shannon. And, you know, a lot of my family still lives in Dormont, but it has always just felt like home to me in a way that other communities haven't felt. I guess that's one of the reasons I bought a house in Brookline, was because it's so close to Dormont, and Brookline was a little bit more affordable, so I just like took the L and bought a house in Brookline, even though I love Brookline. But yeah, Dormont was a little bit out of my price range, especially in the last few years where Dormont has sort of like blown up. I remember when I was in high school, we used to say Dormont was like the most affordable community out of the 3, and now it's like the most expensive because the real estate has just blown up. But it's become more expensive for good reason. It's just got a lot of high value things going on. A lot of places and a lot of businesses are putting down roots here and putting their mark here, as they should. It's a great community to build a business, but also like start a family and have this like really amazing, beautiful like house with a ton of characteristic. I will say one of the drawbacks to Dormont is the very narrow streets, and the parking situation on the street can be atrocious at times. There are some houses that have off-street parking, but a lot of them do not, and so a lot of houses in Dormont actually don't have any driveway or garages. So that's something that you kind of have to contend with or grapple with if you're thinking about buying in Dormont, just because of how like it is very, very narrow in Dormont. It's like the best way I can describe it, and the parking is not plentiful. But if you can get past that, then you can have like a really authentic city suburban experience that's just so Pittsburgh. And I think Dormont is like one of the oldest communities in Pittsburgh. It's definitely one of the oldest communities in the South Hills, hence why you have some Victorian houses there. But it is just, I love Dormont, and I really think it's the place to be. And it's one of those communities that I could see spending the rest of my life in, because it gives me all the things that I want. Like, I'm close to the city, but I'm also in a suburb, and if I want to get away from the city area, I can do that. Like, I can, you know, go a little bit more south, and I'm not far away from things, and I just think it's just a great place to be. I do truly love Dormont, and I'm a little bit sad that it's the lowest on the list out of all of these places. I think it should be at least at spot 6. So I would say home prices in Dormont range anywhere from, if it's a really small house, it can be close to $200. But I've seen things sell in the 500s there lately, so it has quite the range. The niche grades. It's got an A overall niche grade, A minus public schools, A minus housing, A good for families, B minus crime and safety, A plus nightlife, and B minus for diversity. So that is all the communities on my list based on niche ratings and rankings. I think it is a pretty solid list. Of course, there are other communities in the South Hills that are worth looking at, that are great, that are worth buying, but you can research them all on the niche website. I'll give a link to the niche website in the descriptions box below. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive list, and there's a lot of options if you want to live in the South Hills. If you'd like to learn more about living in the South Hills, you can download my relocation guide from my website, which I will provide that link as well. I divided Pittsburgh into 4 categories: North, South, East, and West. And I give a pretty hearty description of the South Hills, and I would consider myself a South Hills expert, so that relocation guide is definitely going to be able to give you a lot of information. And of course, you can always message me and pick my brain as well. My inbox is always open, and I'm always open to feedback in addition to everything else. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon. Bye-bye.